Welcome in, everybody, to another deep dive into some fascinating source material.
Yeah, always fun to see what we're going to dig into today.
That's right. So today we're going to be talking about necromancy, mediumship, and spiritual objects.
Okay.
And we have some really interesting sources. We've got some articles about historical necromancy, some articles about famous mediums,
Okay.
the role of holy objects in different traditions, and even some modern paranormal investigation.
So looking at how all these things connect.
Yeah, what's the connection between all these things?
Yeah, very interesting.
So let's jump in with necromancy. I think that's a good place to start.
Sure.
Now, I know necromancy has kind of a spooky reputation, associated with dark magic and all that.
Right. Yeah.
But what is it really?
Yeah, it's often associated with kind of the negative aspects of communicating with the dead. But, more broadly, it's really just any communication with the dead. And historically, it was used for a variety of purposes, sometimes good, sometimes bad.
So not necessarily like summoning demons and casting curses.
Right. Not always. It could be something as simple as, trying to get in touch with a deceased loved one.
Right.
Or, seeking guidance from the spirits of your ancestors.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was also sometimes used for divination, trying to learn about the future.
Okay.
So it really ran the gamut.
So our sources mention the use of runes and symbols a lot in necromancy.
Yeah.
What's the significance of those?
Well, runes were an ancient alphabet used by the Norse and other Germanic peoples.
Okay.
And they were believed to have magical power.
Okay, so each rune had a specific meaning and energy associated with it.
Right. And by inscribing these runes on objects or even on bodies, people believed that they could influence events.
Yeah.
Offer protection or even try to bind souls.
That's getting a little spooky.
Yeah.
Our sources also mention the Picatrix, which is a medieval grimoire that supposedly contained instructions on necromancy and astral magic.
Yeah, the Picatrix is a fascinating text. It's a really good example of how necromancy was viewed in the medieval period. It wasn't always seen as evil. In some contexts, it was actually considered a way to access hidden knowledge and power.
Like a forbidden textbook.
Exactly.
Okay. And speaking of forbidden knowledge, we also came across some ancient texts like the Greek magical papyri and the Book of Enoch.
Right. Those texts give us a glimpse into how necromancy was intertwined with religious and spiritual beliefs in ancient times. They weren't just spell books. They actually reflected the cultural understanding of the afterlife.
Right.
And the desire to communicate with those who had passed on.
I wonder if they were tapping into something real, something beyond our understanding.
It's possible. Who knows?
Right. Well, let's shift gears a bit. We've been talking about ancient history.
Sure.
What about some more recent examples of people who have claimed to communicate with the dead?
Well, that brings us to the world of mediums.
Okay.
Mediums are individuals who claim to have the ability to act as a bridge between the living and the dead.
Right, and we have some pretty captivating examples, like Eusebia Palladino, the Italian medium. Yeah.
Who is known for her dramatic seances.
Yeah, Palladino's seances were quite the spectacle.
Really?
Objects would be flying around tables, would be levitating, and spirits were supposedly materializing.
Sounds like something straight out of a movie.
Yeah, it was quite a show.
But were her abilities ever actually proven?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
Palladino attracted both believers and skeptics. Some people saw her as a genuine medium,
right,
while others accused her of trickery.
Okay, so the jury's still out on whether she was the real deal or a master illusionist.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, well, what about some other famous mediums?
Well, there's Leonora Piper, an American medium who's actually studied extensively by William James.
Wow, if William James was interested in her, she must have been pretty convincing.
Yeah, James was considered the father of American psychology.
Right.
So he was a serious scholar, and he was initially very skeptical of Piper.
Okay.
But after years of studying her, he actually came to believe in her abilities. Wow, so what kind of phenomena did she exhibit?
Piper was known for her trance mediumship.
Oh, okay.
So she would go into a trance, and then she would channel messages from the deceased.
So unlike Palladino's, dramatic displays, this was more about communication.
Exactly. It was much more subtle.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's not forget about those who were more associated with the darker side of necromancy, the conjurers and the sorcerers.
Indeed.
What about them?
Well, one prominent figure in that realm is Cornelius Agrippa.
Okay.
He was a German occultist, and his writings delved into magic, alchemy, and necromancy.
Oh, so he was like a Renaissance man of the occult.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay.
Agrippa's work had a lasting impact on the Western occult tradition. He really shaped how magic and necromancy were viewed for centuries to come.
Wow. And what about Alessandro Cagliostro?
Oh, Cagliostro. He was an Italian adventurer shrouded in mystery.
Okay.
He was said to have learned necromancy and other occult practices during his travels.
Sounds like a real-life Indiana Jones of the occult world.
Yeah, he was a fascinating character.
So what was he known for?
Cagliostro was known for blending magic science and showmanship.
Okay.
He performed all sorts of feats that amazed audiences across Europe.
Wow.
Although separating truth from legend in his case is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's fascinating how these figures, whether they were genuine practitioners or clever illusionists, they really captured the public's imagination.
Yeah, they did.
With their claims of supernatural power.
Absolutely.
Well, let's move on to a different aspect of our deep dive.
Sure.
We've talked about necromancy, we've talked about mediumship.
Right.
But what about the role of holy objects and practices in different traditions, especially those that are aimed at protection against darker forces?
That's where we see this really fascinating intersection of faith ritual and the belief in the power of objects to connect us with the divine.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
What are some examples of these holy objects and practices?
Well, in the Christian tradition, relics are highly revered.
Okay.
Relics are objects, often body parts or fragments of clothing that are associated with saints or biblical figures.
Like the true cross.
Exactly.
Rad, I remember learning about that in history class.
Yeah. Fragments that are believed to be from the cross on which Jesus was crucified are among the most cherished relics.
Okay.
They're often housed in ornate reliquaries and used in sacred rituals.
And then there's the Shroud of Turin.
Oh, yes.
Which some believe to be the burial cloth of Jesus.
The Shroud of Turin is one of the most famous and controversial relics in the world.
Yeah.
The image of a man's face on the cloth has sparked debate and investigation for centuries.
It's amazing how these objects hold such power and fascination even after all this time.
Yeah.
It really is.
What about holy garments? Do those play a role in protection as well?
Absolutely. In many religions, specific garments are worn during religious ceremonies.
Right.
And they're believed to hold spiritual significance.
I'm thinking of things like the chasuble.
The ornate vestment worn by priests during Mass.
Right. The chasuble, the alb, and other liturgical garments are more than just ceremonial attire.
Okay.
They symbolize a connection to the divine, and they act as a conduit for sacred power.
So it's not just about what they look like, but what they represent.
Exactly.
Okay, what about protection against demonic forces? What methods are mentioned in the Bible for that?
Well, the Bible emphasizes prayer as a direct line to God.
Right.
It's a way to seek divine protection.
Okay.
Fasting is another practice that's mentioned in the Bible.
Right.
It's seen as a way to strengthen one's resolve and resist temptation.
So it's about purifying the body and mind to become more resilient?
Exactly.
What about the use of holy oil?
Oh, yes, holy oil.
I've heard about that in exorcism rituals.
Right. Holy oil is blessed by a priest.
Okay.
And it's believed to carry divine power.
Okay.
It's often used in blessings and exorcisms to repel evil.
So it's about harnessing spiritual energy through ritual and faith to ward off negative forces.
Exactly.
Okay, but how do all of these historical practices connect to how we understand spiritual phenomena today?
That's a great question, and it brings us to the realm of modern encounters and paranormal phenomena.
Perfect. I'm ready to dive into that, but first, let's take a quick break to gather our thoughts. We'll be right back with more fascinating insights into the world of necromancy, mediumship, and spiritual objects.
Okay, sounds good. So where were we?
Well, we were talking about, how these historical practices, how they connect to modern understandings of, the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
I'm curious about this idea of an APXH shift that we came across. It wasn't fully explained, but it seemed to suggest that, spiritual presence can cause actual changes. Changes in the environment.
Yeah, and that kind of aligns with what some researchers are calling dimensional overlap.
Okay.
Where the spiritual realm kind of intersects with our physical reality.
Okay.
And that can cause measurable changes in energy, even affecting our senses.
So we're not just talking about like feelings or intuition.
Right.
We're talking about actual physical changes.
Yeah, measurable changes like sudden drops in temperature, shifts in atmospheric pressure, or even, unexplained sounds.
Like those electronic voice phenomena.
Exactly. EVPs.
Right, EVPs that ghost hunters try to capture.
Right.
Okay, so if these shifts are real, how do paranormal investigators, how do they try to measure them?
Well, they use a variety of tools. Electromagnetic field detectors, thermal cameras,
Okay.
even devices that sweep radio frequencies trying to capture those spirit voices.
Wow, that's pretty amazing that technology is being used to try to explore, these supernatural realms.
It is.
But let's be honest, encountering something unexplained can be pretty unsettling.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Even terrifying.
Right.
What advice do our sources offer for those who might find themselves in, such a situation?
Well, they emphasize the importance of grounding techniques.
Okay.
Ways to kind of calm the mind.
Right.
And regain a sense of control when you're faced with the unknown.
So practical things like deep breathing.
Exactly.
Visualization.
Yeah, focusing on the present moment.
Okay.
Grounding yourself in your physical surroundings.
Okay.
That can help manage that anxiety and fear.
So they also suggest setting boundaries.
Yes.
Physically and mentally.
Yes.
What do you mean by setting boundaries with something that might not even be physically there?
Right. Well, it could be as simple as verbally saying that, any unwanted entities are not welcome in this space.
Okay.
Or visualizing a protective barrier around yourself.
Okay.
It's a way of asserting your own energy and creating a safe space.
Interesting how these techniques combine mental and spiritual approaches.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
What about protective objects? Do our sources talk about those at all?
Yeah, many cultures believe in the power of protective items like crystals,
Okay.
religious symbols,
Okay.
specific herbs.
Okay.
For instance, black tourmaline is often used for protection against negative energy, while amethyst is associated with spiritual awareness and purification.
It's almost like carrying a little bit of spiritual armor with you.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
We talked about holy water earlier.
Right.
How does that fit into this idea of protection?
Well, holy water is blessed through ritual.
Okay.
And it's believed to carry protective and purifying properties in many traditions.
So it's not just about the water itself.
Right.
It's about the intention
Exactly.
and the belief behind it.
Yeah, the ritual imbues it with that spiritual dimension.
Okay, I've got a kind of a left turn here for you.
Sure.
Do you think the act of writing itself holds a certain power?
That's a fascinating question.
Right.
We've been talking about runes and inscriptions.
Right.
And how they were believed to have, magical power.
Right, like words can have an effect.
Exactly. Words have the ability to inspire, to heal, to destroy.
Yeah.
Makes you think about the power of storytelling.
Yeah.
How myths and legends have shaped our understanding of the world.
It's true.
Yeah. Stories are vessels of knowledge.
Right.
Belief, even magic.
Okay. Switching gears a little bit here.
Sure.
We've been focusing mainly on the Christian tradition so far.
Right.
But what about other traditions? Other pantheons?
Oh, of course.
Do they have their own sets of deities?
Oh, yeah.
And spiritual beings associated with the other side?
Absolutely. The world is full of diverse pantheons,
Right.
each with its own unique cosmology and spiritual beings.
Give us a quick tour of some of those.
Sure. Well, in ancient Greece, you have the Olympian gods,
Okay.
Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Hades,
Right.
and many others, each representing different aspects of nature and human experience.
Right. It's like a whole cosmic soap opera up there.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay, what else?
Then there's the Norse pantheon,
Okay.
with Odin the Allfather,
Right.
Thor the god of thunder,
Right.
Loki the trickster god.
Norse mythology has become so popular.
It has.
It's fascinating how these ancient stories still resonate with us today.
They do, and let's not forget the Celtic pantheon,
Okay.
with deities like the Dagda-Brigid and Lugh,
Okay.
representing fertility, healing, and craftsmanship.
Wow, it's amazing how these different cultures all develop their own unique ways of understanding the spiritual world.
It is.
Okay, let's circle back to necromancy for a second.
Sure.
Besides the texts that we've already mentioned, are there any other ancient writings that shed light on this practice?
Oh, absolutely. The Greek magical papyri, for instance.
Huh?
It's a collection of texts from Greco-Roman Egypt,
Okay.
containing a variety of spells and rituals, including those related to necromancy.
So like a spell book for summoning spirits?
Yeah, you could say that,
Yeah.
but it's important to remember that these texts were meant for those who understood the risks
Right.
and responsibilities involved.
Probably best to leave it to the experts.
Yeah, probably a good idea.
Okay, but it's fascinating to see how necromancy was viewed and practiced in different cultures.
It is.
What about the role of the church in shaping perceptions of necromancy?
That's a significant point. During the medieval period, the church actively condemned necromancy.
Really?
Yeah, they saw it as a form of heresy.
Wow.
They associated it with witchcraft and demonic forces.
So necromancy went from being a somewhat accepted practice in some ancient cultures to being totally demonized in the Middle Ages.
Pretty much. Yeah, it reflects the changing religious and social landscape of that time.
Right.
The church was trying to consolidate its power and establish a clear moral code.
Right.
And necromancy, with its perceived association with dark forces, was seen as a threat.
Yeah, like a battle for the souls of humanity.
Exactly.
On one side, you have the church promoting faith and obedience.
Right.
And on the other side, you have those who delved into forbidden knowledge, seeking power.
Yeah.
Maybe even challenging the authority of the church.
It's a very compelling way to put it. And that tension between the sacred and the profane, it continues to echo through history, influencing how we understand the spiritual realm even today.
That's a lot to process.
It is.
Ancient texts, pantheons, the church's stance on necromancy.
Yeah.
What about those who practiced or were accused of practicing necromancy in more modern times?
Okay.
Who are some of the key figures there?
Let's bring our exploration a little closer to the present.
Okay.
One figure that immediately comes to mind is Aleister Crowley.
Crowley.
Yeah.
The self-proclaimed wickedest man in the world.
That's the one.
He definitely had a reputation for pushing boundaries, challenging societal norms.
Absolutely.
What was his connection to necromancy?
Well, Crowley's magical system, known as Thelema, it drew from various sources: ancient Egyptian magic, Kabbalah, Eastern mysticism. He was really interested in exploring the full spectrum of human experience, including those aspects that were deemed taboo or dangerous by society.
Okay, so he wasn't afraid to delve into the darker side of magic.
Not at all.
Okay.
To experiment with practices that others might consider forbidden.
Right, so necromancy wasn't the central focus of his work.
No, it wasn't.
But it was something that he explored.
He saw it as a way to tap into hidden knowledge and power, to transcend the limitations of ordinary consciousness.
So he was kind of a spiritual rebel, a maverick who dared to challenge the established order, explore these uncharted territories of the soul.
That's a good way to put it. Are there any other figures that come to mind?
Yes.
Okay.
Another intriguing figure is Dion Fortune.
Dion Fortune, okay.
A British occultist who was also active in the early 20th century.
Yes.
She was a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
Oh, wow.
A secret society dedicated to the study and practice of magic and mysticism.
Yeah. Secret societies of magic sounds like something out of a Dan Brown novel.
Right.
Yeah. Perhaps there's some truth to the idea that these secret societies were exploring knowledge and practices that were hidden from the public eye. In Fortune's case, she was known for her work with ceremonial magic, involving complex rituals and invocations, aimed at contacting spiritual beings and harnessing their power.
So she was like a spiritual scientist, experimenting with rituals and techniques.
Yeah, trying to unlock the mysteries of the unseen world.
Did her work involve necromancy?
Her writings don't explicitly focus on necromancy, but her work with spirits and her exploration of the boundaries between the living and the dead certainly touches on those themes.
It seems like a recurring pattern. Those drawn to magic and mysticism often find themselves exploring the realms of the afterlife, seeking to communicate with those who have crossed over.
It speaks to this fundamental human desire to understand the mysteries of life and death. To seek connection and meaning beyond our physical existence.
Yeah, we've covered so much ground.
We have.
From ancient necromancy to modern day mediums and occultists. Let's zoom in on one more object before we wrap up this deep dive. What can you tell us about a thurible?
A thurible is a metal censer. Often quite ornate. Used in religious ceremonies to burn incense. It's typically suspended from chains. And swung, gently releasing that fragrant smoke that fills the air.
So it's like a fancy incense burner?
You could say that, but its significance goes beyond mere aesthetics. In many traditions, the burning of incense is a symbolic act. It represents prayers rising to heaven, the purification of a sacred space, or a way to create a specific atmosphere for spiritual connection.
I love how these seemingly simple objects can hold so much symbolism and meaning. Acting as conduits between the material and spiritual realms?
Exactly. It reminds us that the world is full of hidden depths waiting to be explored. And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're uncovering layers of meaning, history, belief. peeling back the veil of the ordinary to reveal the extraordinary.
Absolutely. This journey has been incredibly insightful. But for now, let's take a moment to gather our thoughts and prepare for the final leg of our exploration. We'll be right back with more fascinating insights into the world of necromancy, mediumship, and spiritual objects.
Sounds good.
All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive today into necromancy, mediumship, and spiritual objects.
You know, as we were going through all these sources, one thing that really struck me was this recurring idea of inscriptions and their connection to the spiritual realm. Remember we were talking about runes and how they were believed to have that magical power?
Yeah, like each symbol was a tiny spell waiting to be activated.
Exactly. And it got me thinking about something else that came up in the research.
Okay.
The idea of inscribing runes or magical phrases on the skin of dead bodies.
Oh, wow. That's pretty intense. Is that something that actually happened historically, or is it more like a horror movie trope?
It's definitely portrayed in a very sensationalized way in pop culture. But there are some historical and cultural threads to consider.
Okay, so let's unravel those threads.
Right.
Where does this idea come from, and what was the purpose of these inscriptions?
Well, in Nordic traditions, runes were believed to have the power to influence events or invoke specific energies.
Okay.
And while the historical evidence of runes being inscribed on human skin is limited,
Okay.
we know that they were frequently carved on objects, weapons, or even bones.
So it's like imbuing the object with a specific intention or power.
Exactly. And when it came to the dead, the intention might have been to bind the soul, offer protection in the afterlife, or even to curse enemies.
Oh, wow. That gets into some pretty dark territory. Were there any other traditions that had similar practices?
Medieval European necromancy often involved the use of human remains in rituals,
Okay.
although the details are often shrouded in mystery and speculation.
Right.
But the idea of using inscriptions to control or manipulate spirits was definitely present.
It's like this blend of ancient beliefs and morbid curiosity, a recipe for some truly spooky tales.
Yeah.
And speaking of spooky tales, I can't help but think about how horror movies often play with these themes.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, like A Haunting in Connecticut, which we talked about earlier.
Right.
It draws on these ideas.
Yeah, portraying these post-mortem inscriptions as gateways to hauntings and supernatural events.
Right. It's a reminder that some things are maybe best left undisturbed.
Maybe so.
But circling back to the core of our deep dive today, what does all of this tell us about the human relationship with the spiritual realm?
Well, I think it says a lot about our enduring fascination with what lies beyond our physical existence, whether it's through necromancy, mediumship, or the veneration of holy objects. Humanity has always sought ways to bridge that gap between the seen and the unseen.
It's like we're wired for transcendence.
Yeah.
You know, like for a glimpse into those mysteries that lie beyond the veil.
I think you're right. And in our exploration of these practices, both ancient and modern,
Right.
we're not just uncovering these historical curiosities, but we're also reflecting on our own beliefs,
Right.
fears and hopes about what might exist beyond the horizon of our earthly experience.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's been an incredible journey of discovery. We've explored the historical depths of necromancy, the enduring human fascination with mediums, the power and symbolism of spiritual objects, and even touched upon the modern-day search for evidence of the paranormal.
We've covered a lot of ground, ancient texts, different pantheons and their spiritual beings, and that complex relationship between religion and these practices we've been discussing.
I feel like my mind has been stretched in all sorts of fascinating directions.
And that's the beauty of a deep dive like this.
Yeah.
It's not just about absorbing information.
Right.
It's about sparking curiosity, challenging assumptions, and opening ourselves up to new ways of seeing the world.
Absolutely. We've learned about practices that have been both revered and reviled throughout history.
It's true.
Practices that reflect humanity's ongoing quest to understand the mysteries of life, death, and what might lie beyond.
And as we wrap up this exploration, I hope you, dear listener, are left with a lingering sense of wonder and a desire to continue exploring these fascinating, sometimes spooky realms of human belief and experience.
Because as we've discovered, there are always more rabbit holes to explore, more mysteries to unravel in the vast and ever-evolving world of the unexplained.
And the Deep Dive is always here to guide you through those uncharted territories, offering insights and perspectives to illuminate your path.
So until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep your minds open to the wonders that lie beyond the